1977. Let's do it. Welcome back, everybody, to my favorite albums year by year. This year we're in 1977. This is the 11th installment. You can find all these in a playlist if you're interested. 1977, man, another great year for some music. A lot of great debut albums. A lot of my favorite albums from particular artists came out this year. Some classic albums came out this year. Let's get to it. January we had Pink Floyd released Animals. What a fantastic album. This is one of those hard to pick for my favorite album from this band. There's 4 of them that really stand out, and this one has been on the top quite a few times. I just love this album top to bottom. There's only 5 songs on it. It's bookended by Pigs on the Wing parts 1 and 2. Then it's got Dogs, Pigs, and Sheep. And it's a statement about the music industry, basically, from the band, how they viewed the music industry. And this album's just loaded with some great stuff. Dogs is probably my favorite track. It's got just some outstanding guitar playing on it. 4 great guitar solo breaks. Just killer, top to bottom. Great keyboard playing on this one from Rick Wright. Lyrically, it's got some really good stuff on it, but for me, the standout stuff on this album is David Gilmour's guitar work. It's just one of my favorite albums ever. Alright, then we've got Fleetwood Mac put out Rumors, one of the greatest selling albums of all times, for good reason. There's not a bad song on this album. I was first introduced to this album in about 1980 by my sister-in-law, and just fell in love with it. And I've owned it on cassette, CD, MP3s, whatever. I've listened to it so many times. It's just a great album. Virtually a greatest hits from Fleetwood Mac from the Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks era. Beautiful album. It's got some great songs on it. Jethro Tull put out Songs from the Wood. This is in the era where Tull could do no wrong for me. I love that particular song, Songs from the Wood. Just a really nice album. Some good music on that album. Hard to beat Jethro Tull for me. Peter Gabriel put out his first album after having left Genesis a couple of years earlier. He put out 4 albums in a row that were just titled Peter Gabriel, and they all had some really good stuff on them. They're really nice albums to listen to. Pretty much everything he's put out solo-wise has been really good albums, but that's another good one. Cheap Trick put out their first album this year. Foreigner put out their first album this year. I saw them not too long after this. Feels Like the First Time, Cold as Ice. Some really good stuff on that album as well. Listen to it if you haven't. AC/DC put out Let There Be Rock. This was another Australian release. They still hadn't gotten a good international deal or something at this point, so their stuff came out bits and pieces internationally. Most of it was released in Australia first. The Australian version had Dog Eat Dog, Let There Be Rock, Bad Boy Boogie, Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be, Whole Lot of Rosie. It's a classic AC/DC album. It would eventually come out in the States as well. Commodores put out The Commodores. This was like their 7th album or something like that. This one is notable for having one of the best songs ever written on it. I'm not talking about Brick House, although that's up there, right? But Easy. Easy Like a Sunday Morning. Just a fantastic, beautiful song. Literally one of my favorite songs ever recorded. Great stuff. The Clash came out. They would go on to make some noise. Judas Priest put out Sin After Sin. They were still gaining ground, in my opinion. Good album. Not my favorite, but a really good album. Let's see, this one had Sinner, Diamonds and Rust. Great cover of a Joan Baez song. Dissident Aggressor. There's some good stuff on this one. There's some classic Judas Priest on that album. The Beach Boys, or Brian Wilson, but the Beach Boys, put an album out called Love You. Probably overlooked by most people. I think the Beach Boys had been fading since their beach era, since their surf music era, but they put out some good stuff, and this album is no exception. This is the one that Brian Wilson calls his favorite that they ever put out. It's worth a listen. Give it a shot. Alice Cooper, struggling with alcohol, put out Lacin' Whiskey. He would go into rehab right after this. This has one of my favorite Alice Cooper songs on it, You and Me. It's a ballad. And some of his ballads were some of his best music to me, but You and Me is just a beautiful song. Really good. I really like that one a lot. Heart put out Little Queen. This is their second album. They were moving right along. This one had Barracuda, Little Queen, Kick It Out. Some really good stuff on it. Love the Ladies from Heart. Steve Miller Band put out The Book of Dreams. It's his 10th album. Really, probably the second or third since he was kind of transitioning over into that catchy pop rock kind of stuff. Getting away from his blues beginnings. This one had Jet Airliner, Swingtown, Jungle Love. Good album. I think he would put out Greatest Hits album the year after this, and that's one of the better Greatest Hits albums that was ever released. Most of the stuff on that came from this album and the previous album. Ted Nugent, Cat Scratch Fever. Little Feat, Time Loves the Hero. This is their 6th album. High Roller, Time Loves a Hero, Rocket in My Pocket. Old Folks Boogie is on there. Missing You. They were still putting out some good music. Definitely still putting out some good music. Bob Marley and the Wailers. Really Bob Marley. Put out Exodus. His critically acclaimed album. It's just loaded with really good stuff. One Love, Exodus, Waiting in Vain, Jammin', Three Little Birds, Turn Your Lights Down Low. It's an absolutely classic album. Bob Marley's Exodus. Go check that out if you haven't. Kiss put out Love Gun. I believe this was their 6th studio album. Another classic Kiss album for me. There were a couple of clunkers on here, but there's some rocking stuff on this album. I Stole Your Love, Christine 16, Shock Me, Tomorrow and Tonight, Love Gun. Just some really good stuff on it. Not their strongest album, but a good one nonetheless. At the time, that was probably my favorite album that came out this year. That or the live album that they put out. They put out Kiss Alive 2 as well this year. I listened to that who knows how many times. Just a magnificent snapshot of where they were at the time. They were really at probably their peak right about this time. And those two albums have some really good stuff on it. Steve Winwood put out his first solo album. Not a lot of memorable stuff on that, but started him on his way in the solo realm. Yes, put out Going for the One. It was their 8th album. And it had a couple of really big songs on it. Notably Going for the One, Wondrous Stories. There's only 5 tracks on this album. Wondrous Stories is like a 15-16 minute song. Great song. Great stuff on this album as well. Styx put out The Grand Illusion. It was their 7th album. And it's got some good stuff on it. Grand Illusion, Fooling Yourself, The Angry Young Man, Come Sail Away, Miss America. Good stuff. Classic era for Styx for me. They put out 3 or 4 albums in a row that's just full of great stuff. Transferring into disco still, the Village People put out their first album. Leif Garrett put out his first album. Bay City Rollers. All that kind of stuff was coming out. Grateful Dead put out Terrapin Station. This was their 9th album. And it had some good stuff on it. Estimated Prophet, Dancing in the Streets, Passenger, Samson and Delilah, Sunrise, Terrapin, Big Long Sweet, Terrapin Station. Some really, really good Dead on that. They played pretty much everything off of that album, except Sunrise. They didn't play that a whole lot, but they had some staples from their live show that came off of that album. Another great debut, Lemmy left a band called Hawkwind, put together a band called Motorhead, and they debuted this year. Classic album cover. Great song. Motorhead, Lost Johnny, White Line Fever. They did a version of Train Kept a Rollin' on here. Just Motorhead became Motorhead. And
that's a good thing.
But that was their debut. Rush put out A Farewell to Kings, their follow-up to 2112. This had some good stuff on it. They were kind of in that mode of doing albums that had like one big epic and then 3 or 4 other songs on it. So they actually had a couple of big epic songs on this one. A Farewell to Kings is on here, Xanadu, Closer to the Heart, Cinderella Man, Madrigal, and then Cygnus X1, Book 1. Great Rush album. There's such good stuff on there. They really never put anything out that I didn't like. The Talking Heads debuted this year with Talking Heads 77. Had some good early Talking Heads on it. Psycho Killer was the closer to that album, and it's just a classic song. Yeah, I really like the Talking Heads. Pretty much everything they did up till like Little Creatures, which was kind of the end of their run, but they had some good stuff. Steely Dan put out what most people consider the pinnacle of their career, which was Asia. I won't argue with that. It had Black Cow, Asia, Deacon Blues, Peg, Home at Last, I Got the News, and Josie. And they were still just the two of them, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, using loads of great studio musicians to back them up. And yeah, that's a really good album, Asia. by Steely Dan. Billy Joel put out an album called The Stranger. And if you've never listened to The Stranger in its entirety, as soon as you click off this video, go look that up. It's just a very well put together album with some great songs on it. You've probably heard, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 songs off of it without even having listened to the album. It's got Moving Out, The Stranger, Just the Way You Are, beautiful song. Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, Vienna, Only the Good Die Young, another beautiful song, She's Always a Woman, Get It Right the First Time, and Everybody Has a Dream. That is just a magnificent album. I think it's probably my favorite Billy Joel thing that he ever did. Some really good stuff on that album. He put out another couple of albums right after that were pretty good too, but I think that one was the best of the bunch. ELO came out with probably their biggest album, Out of the Blue. Fantastic album, double album. Great album art, double fold, just some really cool stuff. I really miss the days of albums with liner notes and all this cool stuff that came along with them. And that was a good one. This one had Turn to Stone, Sweet Talking Woman, Mr. Blue Sky. What else was on that? Thinking there was something else on there that was, the whole album's really good, but those are probably the big songs on there. Wild West Hero. Yeah, I love ELO. They put out some great music. They were kind of a unique band at that time, I think. Not many people were putting out those kinds of albums with orchestration and strings and different things like that, mixed in with that rock, somewhat progressive sound in there. But yeah, Out of the Blue is a fantastic album. We had Kansas, followed up Left Overture with Point of No Return. This was their 5th album. You definitely heard some songs off this one, probably more than you want to. Point of No Return, Paradox, Portrait, Dust in the Wind. Yeah, great album, fantastic album. Dust in the Wind was written by Kerry Livgren as an exercise in learning how to finger pick on guitar. He had never really messed around with that before, and he was playing around with different patterns and came up with Dust in the Wind out of that, so he was a quick learner. It's a great album. Lynyrd Skynyrd put out their 5th and, to me, their final album. Never was into Skynyrd after the plane crash. I know a lot of people disagree that they put out some good stuff and continued to be a good band, but after that, that was it for me. I have this original album. So they originally released this album with this album cover, and a couple of days before or after, I don't remember now, the plane crash occurred, and they re-released this album. They reissued it with no flame, so it was this cover, because it was just kind of a painful reminder of what had happened. This one was their first studio album with Steve Gaines, who was an absolute killer guitar player. Great songwriter, good singer. One of those what ifs, man. What would have been with Lynyrd Skynyrd if he had stuck around for a couple of 3 or 4 more albums? What's Your Name? That Smell, One More Time, I Know a Little. It's a Steve Gaines written song. You Got That Right. I Never Dreamed, Honky Tonk Nighttime Man, and Ain't No Good Life, which was sung by Steve Gaines. Now, there were a couple on this album that he had vocals on. You Got That Right being one of them, was co-lead vocals with him and Ronnie Van Zant. Love that song. Absolutely love that song. But Yeah, there's some really good stuff on there. I love the song One More Time. But such is life, and that was the end of Skynyrd for me. A group of guys out of England came together, called themselves the Sex Pistols, and they put out a world-changing album. Never Mind the Bullocks, here's the Sex Pistols. What can you say about this thing, man? It's just a killer album. Punk rock, but just classic, good time, heavy rockin', upbeat, fun stuff. Holidays in the Sun, Liar, No Feelings, God Save the Queen, Problems, 17, Anarchy in the UK, Bodies, Pretty Vacant, New York, and EMI. Just a killer album, and so many bands that came after this were influenced by that album. They had a pretty tumultuous time together. There were albums released after their breakup, but it wasn't new material necessarily. The kind of stuff that Malcolm McDowell had put out to try to make money off the name of the band. Short run, but man, what a magnificent run, right? It was like this, meteor burning up through the sky as it went along. And yeah, great album. I've listened to that one countless times. Queen put out News of the World, their 6th album. This is another one of those great gatefold albums that had cool liner notes and cool pictures and artwork and all that good stuff in it. Really good album. I had this on vinyl back in the day. We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions, Sheer Heart Attack, All Dead, Get Down, Make Love, It's Late, My Melancholy Blues. Great stuff on this album. Fantastic album. They dominated radio that year with We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions. We had a local radio station, AM, WAAY, 50,000 watts, that had a battle of the bands every night, like 7 o'clock or something, and they would put 2 songs up against each other, and people would call in and vote for them. And We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions was on top for probably like 20 weeks or something like that. It was up there forever. I can't remember what finally knocked that off. Yeah, great album. Rod Stewart dipped his foot in the disco ball, put out Footloose and Fancy Free. I had that album as well. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Ramones put out Rocket to Russia. Eric Clapton put out Slow Hand. It was his 5th solo album, and the one where he really, I think, broke out as a solo artist. After this, he became, what you want to call it, the franchise that became Eric Clapton as a solo artist. Cocaine, Wonderful Tonight, Lay Down Sally, The Core, great song. Mean Old Frisco, one of my favorite Clapton songs. Had some good stuff on it, really good stuff. Slow Hand by Eric Clapton. Aerosmith put out their follow-up to Rocks, Draw the Line. This one kind of fell flat to a lot of people for a number of years. It's their 5th album. I think it probably picked up steam in the years since it was put out. I don't think it's their best album, but it had Draw the Line, Critical Mass, Get It Up, Kings and Queens, Milk Cow Blues. It had some good stuff on it. I mean, it's a classic Aerosmith album. And then it wasn't long after this that they had some internal struggles and went through some changes for a little while before they rebounded and came back with the 80s version of Aerosmith that a lot of the younger folks are more aware of. And that's really what we got to go for here. How do you choose a top from this? I mean, Fleetwood Mac, Rumors, Bob Marley, Exodus, Saturday Night Fever soundtrack came out this year. I didn't mention that. The Stranger from Billy Joel, Asia, Nevermind the Bullocks, Here's the Sex Pistols. Another one I failed to mention was Bat Out of Hell from Meatloaf, one of my favorite albums as well. Definitely up for consideration. Animals from Pink Floyd, Little Queen, Street Survivors. Grand Illusion, Slow Hand, News of the World, Songs from the Wood, Farewell to Kings, Kiss, their two albums, Yes, Going for the One, Terrapin Station from the Dead, Foreigner's debut, Peter Gabriel's debut, Point of No Return from Kansas. Just some absolute killer albums came out this year. Some of these hold a real special place in my heart, and it's really difficult to put one of these above the other, especially with about 5 of them. I thought long and hard about this, and I went back and I listened to them just to kind of see what feelings they conjured up and how well they had continued to hold up for me. And really, there's 3 or 4 of these that could be number one easily. It's really difficult to pick one above the other, but I think the one that always fascinates me and really draws me in more than the rest is that puppy right there. Pink Floyd with their second entry into the best album of the year so far, following up on The Dark Side of the Moon from 1973. Animals, just an absolute monster album. I think one of the band's best works, but really one of David Gilmour's best works, and I love his guitar playing, and this album is just loaded with really great stuff. I just can't get enough of it. It's a fantastic album. So there you have it. Animals, Pink Floyd, rising to the top. The other 2 albums that were really hard not to choose were the Sex Pistols and Fleetwood Mac. Both of those albums are just killer to me. But yeah, got to pick one, and I'm going with Animals. So let me know what you think. Drop it down in the bucket below. Let me know what you think of my picks. Tell me what you think I'm going to pick for 78, and we'll see. We'll compare notes, and I will see you then. Take care. I appreciate you watching.